Thank you. Thank you for walking with us, God. Thank you for sending your Son to save us. Thank you for giving us the Holy Spirit to be our comfort and our guide. Lord God, we just give our hearts to you this morning and ask that you will continue to run the race with us, God. That you will use us along the way, and that we will not forget whose we are, because we are yours. I pray this in your mighty name, Jesus. Amen. You guys can be seated. So I know a lot of you guys had like 8 or 10 people sign up for the coffee house prayer thing. And so these are our signs that you guys can take if you are, crystals are kind of big. Yeah, they are. Yes. And Kenny said, well, maybe we should just get t-shirts that say, do you need prayer? Ask me. I'm like, I kind of like that too. So if you signed up, or you raised your hand and said you wanted one of these to take to the coffee houses that you frequent and be available for prayer, come up afterwards and you guys can get them. They're up here. They're nice and bright, so that's always good. We are stuffing Easter eggs for our Easter egg hunts. Directly after the service, we'll have some pizza, which is awesome. Who doesn't love pizza? We will have some pizza, and we will be actually doing this in the basement of the church. We are hoping to stuff, I think, probably 3,000 eggs is our goal, which seems like a whole lot. But how many of you are planning to stay and stuff eggs? Woo! All right, with that many people, we'll be good. Okay, so this is what I was wondering. I know that I asked you to raise your hand if you were going to host an Easter egg hunt. If you are hosting an Easter egg hunt, or you decided to in the last 5 minutes, which I love, would you please raise your hand so that I can see how many we have, because we have to separate out the eggs. So 1, you're working together. 1, I know there was more than that. 2, I thought there were 3 or 4. They were no. Oh, they're not here, so thank you.
Ours will end up being huge.
All right, so good. So I just need to know that because after we stuff the eggs, for those of you that are staying to stuff eggs, we need to divide them out into 3 or 4 amounts. Obviously, the species are having it at their neighborhood, and the neighborhood is big, big, big. So we'll give them probably the majority, but we are going to separate those out into groupings. We have got bags, we've got golden eggs, which will have some cash, which I don't have with me, so I will be getting you cash for those golden eggs. And then obviously all the candy, and then we also have, we made up a little card that has John 3:16 on it. Chris, your Bible's flying. Okay, so it has John 3:16 on the front, and then on the back it says, if you need hope, a place to belong, or a family, please join us on Sundays at 11:30 at the Road Community Church, and our address. So for those of you hosting an Easter egg hunt, you'll also get some of these to give out as well, okay? So that's awesome. Before we do anything, these Easter egg hunts are going to be happening next weekend all the way through to Easter. So we're going to just pray over them right now as a church, because I do believe that God has a divine appointment for each person that shows up at these Easter egg hunts, and we want to pray over our brothers and sisters as they go out as missionaries in their own houses and yards. So if you guys would pray with me right now, real quick. Father, we know that there is not anything that we do in your name that we do on our own power. And so, God, we ask for your help during these Easter egg hunt outreaches, Father, that they will be a tool and a way for us to share your love and your truth with the people that we know that are hurting and dying and lost. God, we live in a generation and in a place and in a world that is broken and very hopeless. And God, you are the hope. You are the only real hope that this world has. So God, help us to be bold as we invite. Help us to be bold as we serve. God, open our mouths and loose our tongues as we do these Easter egg hunts, that we will unashamedly talk about you, God. That we will beautifully share in a simple way the truth of your Son, Jesus, and his salvation through his blood and resurrection. God, I just pray that every invite that goes out will be met with a resounding yes, and that these Easter egg hunts will not just be attended by many, but that many hearts will be changed for you, God. We pray this in the name of Jesus. All right, kiddos, you can go down to Kids Plus with Mara, and nursery is now open with Ms. Grace. Thank you, guys.
No babysitter. She's so disappointed.
No babies today? We've been rock and roll with babies lately.
No pressure, guys. No pressure.
All right, so it is really good to see you guys here. We're just 2 weeks away from Easter, if you can believe it. We're right on top of April, which is kind of hard to believe too. This year is just flying by. With that in mind, Easter is always a day that we encourage you to invite people. I know that Easter is it's not this culturally recognized event like it used to be. I mean, everybody seemed to like, oh, it's Easter Sunday. It's not quite like that anymore, but there's still people in our culture who remember going to church maybe as a kid and have some memories about that. You know, those are the kinds of people that we say, hey, why don't you come to church with me on Easter and be a part of that again. And these Easter egg hunts, let's invite people. I know a lot of you are probably traveling too. You might be going to see family, just you're out of town or whatever. I get that, but I hope that you'll, if you are in town, that you'll be here on that day. I also want to remind you, Good Friday, we're having a service here, and I actually invited our Howell campus as well, because they are not going to have one this year, Good Friday service. So I said, well, come up to Fenton, and the way we do that is just we have a potluck at 6:30. So just bring a dish to pass. We'll have this whole wall lined with food, and then we'll have tables set up here. And actually, after the service next Sunday, I'll be encouraging you guys to stick around and help set that up. But we're gonna have tables. We'll eat together. We'll have communion together, and we'll do a time of just music and in the Word a little bit. I'm not going to preach per se, but just kind of remembering what Christ did for us and recognizing that day for what it is. It's the day that Christ paid the penalty for our sin, and they put him in the grave on that day. And of course, we know what Sunday is all about, the celebration of him coming out of the grave. So hope that you'll be here on Good Friday. Come early, get a seat, because I don't know how many people are coming from Howell. And then last, want to encourage you to stick around next Sunday, not only to help set up for the Good Friday service, but we're going to do a quick informational meeting about this whole, the two campuses on linking. We've got some information to share with you. It's not a meeting where we're taking a vote or anything, but we just 10 minutes or so of just basically getting out the information of where we're at with this process, so you are aware and know what's happening next. So just plan on that. Okay, get your Bibles. You're going to need them. Let's go to 1 Corinthians. We do use our Bibles here at the road. We have this on the wall here, the Love, Learn, Live, and the learn part sometimes it doesn't get as much attention. We're all about going out and reaching out to our community. We want to love one another and love God. But the learn part, that's our fuel groups. That's what you ought to be doing on a regular basis, just in the Word, studying it, learning who God is. It's what we're doing here. It's getting into the Word. It's digging in and saying, okay, what's here for us. And just so you know, the other parts that go with that statement, we're a serving church. We want you to be in service somehow. We want you to be involved in a ministry. If you're brand new or you're newer, sometimes it takes a minute to kind of get acclimated and figure out where you might fit into the ministry here, but we want you involved somehow. And even the people that are involved, some people are involved with 2 things, 3 things. There is a limit, of course. We don't want you to be involved in 10 things, because then you're spread kind of thin and you might get burned out and then you might not come back, and we don't want that. So, we want you to be involved. We want you to be giving in some way. And it's not just finances. That's certainly important. That's how the wheels keep turning here. God provides to his people for the ministry. But we want you to give of your time, to give of your talent. How can what God has given you be passed on and used in his church? So I just want to encourage you with that. All right, so if you're in 1 Corinthians 9, we are continuing our series in 1 Corinthians, and we've just come out of a big chunk of chapter 9 where Paul is talking about his mission. this is kind of his mission statement. Now, most businesses do have a mission statement, and usually after that mission statement comes a series of steps of like how we're going to do this. It's the values that they hold, the actions that they're going to take that will enable that business to fulfill their mission. Probably every store you go in, every business you frequent, every restaurant you patronize, they have some kind of mission statement. Whether it's to make really good food at good prices, or it's to sell widgets at that help people and improve their lives. I know for me, I was trying to think through this, like what are some things that I enjoy and what's their mission statement? And so I thought, well, I love woodworking. And I do love, running the table saw and all that. It's good. I've still got all my fingers, so that's a real bonus. I haven't lopped anything off yet. I say yet because you always respect the saw. Every time I go in there, I'm like, this thing could chop me to bits. So I'm just very cautious. But anyway, I love Rockler. If you do any woodworking, Rockler is the name in woodworking gadgets and gizmos and stuff. And I get the catalog and I'm like drooling over that and looking, I want that, I want that, I want that. I could probably afford like one thing from Rockler a year though because it's a little pricey. But so I said, what's their mission? So I go online and their mission, their goal is to be your go-to DIY resource for everything you need to build both your projects and your confidence. They want to be your go-to do-it-yourself resource. So that's pretty good, right? That's their mission statement. But then they go further. They take it the next step and they say, we're going to do this through a commitment to expert education, expert advice, and expert support. Really nice and neat and tight. It's a good statement. And I guarantee you that almost everywhere you go, every store, some of them actually put it on the wall like we do, right? It's out there. They have a goal that's stated somewhere. Why are we talking about this? Well, because Paul, in this chapter, has given his mission statement. He has declared in the previous verses what is most important to him. What's most important to him? Well, he wants everyone to know Jesus. That's it. He says, I will do everything for the sake of the gospel. He's willing to do whatever it takes as long as it's not sin to reach people with Jesus. And he goes through, he says, I'm going to become all things to all people. I'll be a servant to everyone. I will adjust my approach to meet them at their point of need. So if they're Jewish, I'll come at them from a Jewish perspective. If they're, still obeying the Old Testament law, then I'm going to come at them as a person who obeys the Old Testament law and kind of relate to them on that level. If they're a person who is, more like me, well, that's easy. I can do that. And he says, I'm going to adjust my approach. I'm going to meet them at their point of need. And what he's looking at in terms of success is to reach that goal, to tell people about Jesus. That means he's being successful, and at the end, he wants to receive a prize. He wants a reward for this, but not for him, a reward that comes through the blessing of sharing the gospel. That's where we left off last week, right? He says, I do it all for the sake of the gospel, that I may share with them in its blessings. So that's the mission statement. Win people to Christ, share the blessings of the gospel. Now, we also read in there, some of the methodology here. Okay, we talked about him being a servant to all. We talked about him, becoming all things to all people. But when we get to verse 24, he gets a little more in depth, and he says, this is the mission. Here's the way I'm going to do it. But listen, I want you to hear that this is so important to me that I'm going to treat this as if I'm an athlete training for a race. I'm going to treat this like I'm a boxer getting ready for a fight. I'm going to treat this as if I am going into the strict training regimen in order to accomplish the mission. So we get mission, and then we get action steps. Take a look at 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 24. It says, do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one receives the prize? So run that you may obtain it. Every athlete exercises self-control in all things. They do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we an imperishable. So I do not run aimlessly. I do not box as one beating the air, but I discipline my body. I keep it under control, lest after preaching to others, I myself should be disqualified. So what's Paul saying here? Well, if you look at verses 24 and 26, a couple things that he says here. He says, run that you may obtain the prize. Verse 26, he says, I don't run aimlessly. All through these few verses, Paul is arguing for a life of purpose. live a life of purpose. Before we get to his action plan and some of the things he suggests about discipline and self-control, before we get to that, we need to talk about getting serious about why we're here. What are we doing here? Why are we living this life? Paul would say, embrace this mission. Do what I'm doing. You know what would really disappoint Paul is if he got to the end of his life and looked back and said, man, my life lacked purpose. That would destroy him. Because he's so single-minded, he's so focused. He wants his life to mean something. Paul was driven by what he saw was his purpose, and nothing mattered more than pleasing Jesus, modeling his life after Jesus, and having others observe that and follow in his footsteps. That's what got Paul out of bed in the morning. What gets you out of bed in the morning? But just a simple way to put it is, are you living a purposeful life? Does your life have purpose? And you can have purpose when you're young or old. You can be purposeless when you're young or when you're old. It doesn't matter. Age isn't important. And if you look at your life, if you're disappointed that your life purpose seems to just be getting up, working, coming home, plopping down in front of the TV, and then going to bed, and that's just every day. That seems to be your purpose in life, is just to run this cycle, this schedule every single day, and you don't like that, then stop being disappointed and get a life. Get a life. And I don't mean that in like, you slacker, get a life. What I mean is you can choose to live a life of purpose. You can go and get a life. You can find purpose in what you're doing. Unhappy people are usually people who lack purpose, or they haven't found a way to take the life that they've been given and make the most of it. That's where unhappy people live. They go, I don't have any purpose, and the life I do have is just not really thrilling, and I don't know what to really, I have nowhere to go from here. You say, well, how do I make my life more impactful? What do I do? Well, this is going to sound really simple, and I wouldn't say profound, but are you ready for this? You want to make your life more impactful and have more purpose, don't do stupid stuff. I came up with that all by myself. 8 hours of sermon prep. Don't do stupid stuff. You see, what do I mean by that? Well, look back at some of the dumb things that you have done. Okay?
And don't do that.
Don't do that. Don't do that anymore. So remember 2 weeks ago we talked about shame, we talked about regret, carrying baggage around. I said you got to put that down at the foot of the cross and you just leave it, okay? Don't carry that stuff around. Let it be a reminder that you don't want to do that anymore. I mean, this is really simple, but do fewer things that don't matter and more things that do matter. I know this is like earth-shattering, right? These are like mind-blowing principles here. What do I mean, though? We all have things that we do in our lives that we shouldn't do. Okay? I can give you, I'll give you an example from my own life. I used to really enjoy using the wit and the brain that God gave me to zing other people. I gave that up, okay? Because that was not helpful. Still use it every now and again. Is that what she said? Yeah, I still do. I got to be careful, okay? You know the thing that you guys all have in front of you probably, or in your pocket somewhere, that thing, that little, the flat screen, whatever, in your pocket? Do you know, I'll just tell on myself, okay? The other day I was, I think it was about a week ago, I just got, you know how sometimes you look at the screen and there's like the videos that are like 15 to 90 seconds long? You know what I'm talking about? The shorts, the YouTube, or all that stuff, TikTok. I watched a few of those, and when I looked at the clock, I'm like, man, I was watching those things for a long time, just like swiping, watching video. I went back because I wanted to see how many of those did I watch. This is like embarrassing. I watched 81 of them. In one sitting.
That's before I get out of bed.
I know. Pastor, why are you talking about self-control and getting a life when you watch 80 of those videos in one sitting. To be 81. To be fair, they're only like 15 to 20 seconds long. So I mean, they can be 90. You're right. I probably blew about 45 minutes on that. But anyway. But this is what I'm talking about. We need to do things that have eternal value. I'm not saying you can't ever watch videos on your phone. I'm just saying that we sometimes spend our time doing things that have no value whatsoever. And so we need to do things that have more meaning. Do less meaningless stuff and more meaningful stuff. We have a choice that we make every day about how we're going to spend our day. And it doesn't matter what age you are, you can decide today that you're going to start living with more purpose. And young people, like you and anybody else that's in the youth group, any of you young people, can I just tell you something? Do not wait until you hit a certain age, or until you graduate, or until some life, changing, life-altering thing comes about. You can choose right now to live with purpose. Don't wait till you're an adult to find a purpose. Start asking God now to guide you. Don't wait till you're 29 to get serious about life. Well, maybe I'll get a career. Maybe I'll get serious about God. Don't do that. You'll be wasting time. Because aimlessness in this culture is epidemic. There are people living who don't know why they're here. And if you could take Paul's mentality, if you could just capture this in chapter 9, what is Paul all about? This is what I would draw. I would draw a big circle, and in the middle I'd write gospel. And then I would put arrows going out from every part of that circle. That's Paul's life. That's his purpose. That's his mission. It's that simple. It drove his entire life, sharing the gospel as the mission. He wanted to be a servant to all things to all people, all for the sake of the gospel. And here's what it takes to do this. He starts with purpose. Have purpose. Just don't live an aimless life. What gets you out of bed in the morning? What get Paul out of bed in the morning was, I got to go and I got to share Jesus. It may not be that crystal clear for you yet, but you need to find a purpose. You need to have a reason for existing. So look at verse 24. He says, in order to live a life of purpose, in order to live out this commitment to the gospel, he says, I'm going to run to win. Verse 24. All the runners run, only one gets the prize, so run that you may obtain it. Paul says, I'm going to run to win. And then later he uses a boxing analogy, and he says, I'm going to fight to win. What he means is the goal is always before me. The goal is always before me. The attitude here is if you're going to enter a race, you don't get up to the starting line, you get in the starting blocks, and you're like, all right, I am going to get 4th place if it kills me. No, you get in the race because you want to win. You want to be first. Run to win. Run as a person who's intent on winning the prize. Run like you care. In verse 26, he says, I don't run aimlessly. Well, what would that look like? I mean, can you imagine everybody getting up on the starting line? There's a 100-meter dash. And as soon as the gun goes off, half the field is just like, and the other half's running backwards. And everybody's just like scattering. And you're like, the finish line's over there. You're ridiculous. Where are you going? So he's pointing us in this direction. What are you running for? You're not out for a warm-up jog. You have a purpose, a direction. Find it. Follow it. And then later on, verse 26, he says, I don't box as one beating the air. Imagine you have tickets to the fight of the century. 2 boxers are going to meet in the ring. This is big. This isn't like just Rocky versus Ivan Drago, right? This is bigger than East meets West. This is huge. This is like universal, good against evil kind of boxing match. And you get in there, and everyone's like, oh, yeah, you're cheering for whoever your guy is, and you're so excited for this fight. And then the bell goes off, and they run out to the middle of the ring, and then they turn their backs to each other and start swinging wildly at nothing. You're like, I paid good money for a fight. Turn around, you got to face each other. And they're just haymakers and wild hooks and uppercuts and everything, and they're not fighting. They're boxing aimlessly.
Now, some people have gone to this passage and they say, well, this is Paul talking about shadow boxing. You know, kind of the guy who's, you know, over in the corner kind of doing his little thing, working on combos and everything. I don't think that's what Paul's talking about, because that would actually have some benefit to you. That could actually help you in some way. I think Paul's saying this is a boxing match where you're just intentionally throwing punches at the air. You're literally trying to beat the air. Makes no sense. So Paul says, I run with purpose, I box with purpose, and the comparison is, I live my life with purpose, I fight to win, I run to win, I have a goal in mind, and I want to accomplish it. His point is this: if you're going to take the gospel to a lost world, there has to be some intentionality. Purpose. It doesn't happen by accident. You have to be in it to win it. We'll talk about the prize in just a second, but he says you have to be in it to win it. You have to purposely determine that you are going to go in this direction. You're going to live this life. Verse 25. He says, it's not just enough to decide that you want to win, that you want to have this as your purpose. You have to exhibit some self-control. And he used this metaphor of athletes because athletes, I think, are among some of the most self-controlled people. Now, the Corinthians would have been familiar with the Olympics. Okay, that was happening at this time, not too far away. But where they were located, they were on a little strip of land. And they were like what's that? The isthmus? I can't ever say that. Yeah. But you know what I'm talking about, the little strip of land that connects to the other. Okay. So they would have games named after that strip of land, which I'm not going to try to say again. Okay, but they were these games that they had every couple years. And they gave a pine garland to the winner of those games. They were familiar with this metaphor. In the Olympics, I know, as I was reading and studying, the people who had to enter these games, they had to swear by Zeus to strictly train for 10 months. Like make a vow, basically, that they would be self-controlled and only do what they, were given to do as far as being, prepared for these games. And if they didn't do it, they would be disqualified. And so this strict training that they had to go into, it involved certain disciplines, refraining from certain things. If you go into training, if you're in an athletic event and you're being trained for it, there's probably certain things you can't do. And if you start to look into some of the training regimen of the top athletes, okay, they don't go and work out and like spend their whole day just beating their body into submission and like trying to make it do what they want it to do, and then go out and spend the next 3 days eating cheeseburgers and potato chips. Self-control. They gotta, no, I have a competition coming up, I can't do that. I've got to stay on target. It's like, you remember Michael Phelps? All those gold medals in swimming? I guarantee you, he didn't go do a full day workout preparing for the Olympics and then the next morning have birthday cake for breakfast. You know what I'm saying? Which, doesn't that sound good? Yeah. I love birthday cake for breakfast. It's like the worst thing you can do, but after that party, you're kind of like, oh man, doesn't that sound good?
It's getting me hungry.
No? I don't know, I get excited about that. But anyway, he doesn't do that. Any top athlete is going to refrain from certain behaviors so they can be better at what they're trying to do. And as followers of Christ, we refrain from certain behaviors so that we can better serve Christ. Paul was willing to do that. That's what this whole chapter has been about so far. What did he say? He said, I will not eat meat. I just will never eat it again if it gets in the way of someone knowing Christ. But what about you? I think in our world, self-control is in short supply. We don't live as a culture that says, what can I give up for the betterment of someone else? What do I need? How do I need to step aside so someone else can succeed? Or how do I get out of the way so that the gospel can be presented more effectively? No, we're not usually thinking that. And so the question we have to ask is, when is the last time you withheld something from yourself? That would be an easy question to answer. Some of you are, maybe you gave up something in advance of Easter. You've been kind of giving something up all along. But for some of us, it's harder. When did you withhold something from yourself? Maybe you're fasting or dieting or something. But not just when did you withhold something from yourself, but when did you withhold something from yourself? When did you cease a behavior or resist some kind of temptation in order to be better positioned or better prepared to share the gospel with someone? Maybe you gave up a habit that hindered your testimony. Maybe you gave up something that made you comfortable because it was causing you to shrink back from sharing your faith. You know what I do sometimes when I'm sitting in the coffee shop working? Earbuds. And I'm in there, I'm tapping away on the computer, and I'm working on something. You know what those earbuds do? They tell everybody that walks past you that you're serious, don't talk to me. You know what? I'm going to have to take the earbuds out. Set that out there. All of us have an earbud. We've all got something that we're holding on to that makes us comfortable so that we don't have to, disturb our lives to tell someone about Christ. Self-control means, no, I'm not going to put those in. Or I'm not going to engage in that thing. Or I'm not going to turn to that behavior. I'm not going to go down that path again because I need to be prepared to share Christ with someone. With these athletes, Paul talks about them doing that, having self-control so they can win some wreath that's going to eventually shrivel up and die. He says, think about that athlete. They're basically saying, I'll give up this thing. I will step away from this thing. I'll have the self-control to say no to this thing because I want a wreath. Or in modern context, I will give up all these things for the next 2 years and train because I want a gold medal. I want the prestige. I want the name. I'll give it all up for that gold medal. And Paul says, you should be willing to give it up. Give up X, whatever that is, for a heavenly reward, which is infinitely better than that wreath, infinitely better than that gold medal. If they're willing to do it for a sport, why are you not willing to do that for a reward from Christ? And then he goes into this last section. He talks in verse 27 about discipline. He says, I beat my body into submission. That's what some translations read. So he's saying in the same way the Corinthians need to have self-control and refrain from certain behaviors, they also need discipline. Now, understand, Paul's not asking you to hurt yourself. We're not going to hand out, little miniature whips at the end of the service so you can hit yourself and, I have to beat my body into submission. Paul doesn't want you to hurt yourself, okay? And some people have misinterpreted this, thinking that Christ requires physical pain. No. This is Paul's call to a disciplined life. I'm going to arrange my life around the fulfillment of my mission. He's saying, I'm living in such a way that I'm going to structure my life, I'm going to structure my activities around a purpose so that it points me toward a goal. I've written several books. You guys know this. One of the first books I wrote was called Strong, and I was writing about a guy who got drafted into the Special Forces. Now, I know nothing about the Special Forces. Zero. I barely even know anything about the military. And we just watched a show recently about the selection process to get into Special Forces. And there's a part of it that's like, I'd like to try that for maybe an hour. Maybe after that, I'd be like, no, that's great. You guys can do that. But anyway, my point is that I had to study, understand that world a little bit. You can't really understand it unless you're in it. But to the degree that I could, research it, I did. I read, a number of books on it, so I didn't sound like an idiot as I'm writing this book. And what I found is that these are guys that are disciplined in every area of their life because they have to be. Because they have to be ready to go to war in a moment's notice. And what that means is they can't be on a mission over in the Middle East or something and then come back home and spend 2 or 3 weeks before their next mission just sitting around, at a campfire drinking beers and just eating pizza. They are always in training. They're always in an attitude, in a mentality of preparation. That they're just always staying ready to go so they don't have to get ready. They're just on. And so that means that they spend time doing daily actions that increase their muscle memory so that when they're in a situation, they're in a firefight, they're in some kind of tense environment, their body, their mind, everything already knows what to do. They have to put so many rounds through their guns so that they're sharp and they're ready. They can pull that out and do what they have to do at a moment's notice. It's a disciplined life. And so Paul is calling the Corinthians to a disciplined life, and I think that takes 2 forms. Number one, if you're going to live a disciplined life, you have to regulate your behavior. This goes right along with self-control. and not in a legalistic way where you're so strict that every time you slip a little bit, you're like, oh, failure, and you're like, oh, I'm sinning. No. I'm saying you're regulating your behavior, you're looking at what you don't do, but also what you do. You know? The behaviors you're eliminating and the behaviors you're wanting to add. If you're going to be a disciplined person, you have to give some thought about what you want to look like as you go through your day. Have you ever seen those people who look like they just don't care? You know what I'm talking about. You're like, did you think through? I don't want to pick on Walmart, but sometimes, you know, you go in there and you just like, did you think about where you were going to be today and who might see you and what you would wear and if you would do your hair? And I mean, I'm just saying, there's some people that you see and you go, I don't know if you woke up with a plan. I think you just woke up and said, I hope this works today, and just went for it. Now, I'll admit, there are days, we all need those days, right? The day where someone knocks on your door at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, you're still in your pajamas. I get it, okay? But what Paul is getting at is, do you have a plan? Are you regulating? Are you thinking through your behavior each day? What's your plan for the day? And this sounds really, you know, maybe it sounds juvenile, but do you think through the night before what your next day is going to look like, and then do you plan for it? Do you want, I mean, to live a disciplined life might mean that before you go to bed, you're actually thinking, here's what I've got going tomorrow, and then you make a plan for it. You do things so you're ready to go. Are you ready? Do you know when you're going to read your Bible tomorrow? Do you know when you're going to spend some time with God? Do you know when you're going to have some time with your family? And then there's just the basics, like, do you know like what the day is going to look like? Do you know what you're going to put on, what you're going to wear, what you're going to eat? And you say, why do I need to think about that stuff? Well, just, you know, it'll just happen. Well, I'm going to brag to my daughter for just a second. She's only 13, but you know what she does every night? She makes her lunch. She lays out some clothes for the next day at school. She gets in the, you know, bathroom, does all her, you know, beauty stuff. It's working. All right? And so she's on it. Like, she's ready for the next day. She knows what she's got to do. And she just started doing that. I don't think we told you that. But occasionally I'm like, hey, you forgot your chore. And she's like, Dad, I'm on schedule here. I've got to go to bed. I'm like, I get it, but go do your chore. So sometimes I mess up her pattern. But anyway, the point is, Paul is saying, you guys, if you want to live a disciplined life, then you have got to think through what your life is going to be like. How are you going to regulate your behavior and be self-controlled so that you can accomplish the mission? Now, if you decide today you want to live a disciplined life, it's not going to happen by the end of the week. Because living a disciplined life means to be changed one habit at a time. One habit at a time, one day at a time, until your life resembles what God wants it to be. And Paul's saying, I'm going to live a life dedicated to Christ and to the gospel, and it requires discipline, no different than the discipline required of an athlete preparing to perform. And he says, I go into strict training. Paul trains with purpose to live the life God wants him to live. And all I'm saying is, if you want to live the life that God wants you to live, then you need to go into strict training, and you might need to make some changes in your life. It does not happen by accident. It will not just happen to you one day. Discipline, self-control, and living the Christ life is not going to drop on your head out of the sky. Here's a second thing that I think discipline impacts in our life. Our hardships. Our hardships. We need to let hardships shape our life. When hard times come, do we whine, complain, shrink, oh, woe is me? Or do we confront the hard thing and overcome it? See, discipline, this is where discipline comes in. Discipline is the ability to be confronted with a hardship, with a difficulty, and we keep going. Why? Everyone around us is saying, give up. Everything in us is saying, give up. But we keep going. Why? Because we have been so focused on the goal. We keep going. The training is there. You know, that's the whole point we're talking about it, whether it's an athlete or whether it's a soldier. The training is there so that when everything hits the fan, your training kicks in. The muscle memory, the automatic recognition of this is what I need to do, and you just do it. And as a Christian, We ought to know enough to know that no situation is hopeless. Nothing happens that, oh, it's over, it's done. No situation is hopeless. Name a time Paul confronted hardship and then decided to quit. The Apostle Paul never had that moment, as far as we know. I mean, he was literally stoned to death outside of a city. People came and got him, they dusted him off, he recovered, and he went back to fulfilling the mission. Paul had to discipline his life. He had to sacrifice what he needed to sacrifice for the sake of the gospel. He said, I have a purpose, I have an objective, I want everything I do to be aimed at the gospel. He says, I discipline my body, I keep it under control, so I won't be disqualified. What is he talking about? Well, he doesn't want to be disqualified in the way that he's actually taking himself off the mission. It's like, I don't want to be off the mission. I don't want to be set to the side because I have preached to others and I've told them what they ought to do, and then I end up disqualifying myself. I'm out of the running. I'm it's kind of like what he said to the Galatians. He said, you were running well. Who hindered you? He doesn't want to fail the test. He doesn't want to wash out, have to start over. He wants to stay on course. So his whole point is, I want to be self-controlled. I'm going to undergo training so that when the hard times come, when I'm confronted with something, my heart and my mind do what they've been trained to do. The training takes over, and I overcome. I act like a person of faith because I've disciplined my life. I want to show you a short clip, video clip, and this is where my YouTube viewing paid off because I saw this clip and I was like, all right. But this is where self-control, running to win, discipline all come together. All right, let's take a look at this video if it'll work.
This is the moment that Heather Dorniden brutally slammed into the ground on the last lap of a 600-metre race. She was overtaken from second place when the other runner's foot tripped her.
Looked like Vaughn just clipped her heel and she went down.
Completely devastating her chances of winning. Heather had been the favourite to win, but there were only 200 metres left of the race, so it was up to her teammate to bring it home. Heather's teammate used the clash as an opportunity to pull out from last place to the front of the pack, and it looked like she might just be able to get the win. And that's when something absolutely remarkable happened. Heather got up and started chasing down the pack.
Dorniden is flying down the backstretch. She is catching up. She is going to catch Vaughn Dorn and she may catch some leaders. Wow. She's got Vaughn. This is a gutsy effort from Dorniden. She's pulling it off. She's running right
This is the moment that Heather Dorniden.
I like that clip so much because it's exactly what we're talking about. That as we live this Christian life, as we're running the race, there absolutely is going to be things that knock us down, that try to take us out of the race. But what Paul is saying is if we have been in strict training, we have the self-control and the discipline, we get back up and we keep going. And we're in the race to win. Now, she could have easily laid there on the track and been like, she tripped me, and left the track crying. I wish they'd have had the camera on her face, though, where in that moment where she was like, nope, and get up and just take off. I wish we'd seen that whole thing, because I guarantee you that her training and everything, all the discipline that she put into running that race kicked in, and she went after it. She ran to win. Look, I don't know where you feel like your life is at right now. If you're living a life of purpose, what that purpose is, I'm encouraging you to make your purpose about Christ and following Him, living the life that He's called you to. But to do that requires self-control, it requires discipline, it requires an attitude that says, I'm in this to win this. I want the prize of that heavenly reward. I want to hear well done. I don't want what this life has to offer that's going to fade, it's garbage. I want what God has to offer. Whatever your goal is, whatever your mission is, whatever your purpose is, my prayer is that it is what God would have you to do. And that you're asking Him for the strength to be disciplined and self-controlled in pursuing it.
Stand